Hi, I have here this novelty box full of 45 RPM records. What say we take a look at what's inside? And just try to contain your excitement. For the past few weeks, I've been staying mostly indoors, keeping myself safe and healthy. Hopefully that's the case with you as well. But while I'm locked down, I figured it'd be a good time to look over what I've been purchasing over the last few months, much of which I still have not given an honest listen to. And I figured you might enjoy it as well. But if not, there's always next week's video. First thing I want to talk about is this carrying case. Obviously, you can see it is a reproduction of the Mickey Mouse Disco artwork. One of the cool things, though, is that it looks to have been purchased at Toys R Us. I don't know if I could focus in on that, but there's the old 1980s or even 70s price sticker. But this was $5 at a local Long Island record store. This case is holding all the 45s I have not yet organized, so we're going to pop this open and see what's inside. First thing I have is Planet Clare by the B-52s, the second single from their self-titled debut. Athens, Georgia's The B-52s hit the ground running with their first album, a nice break of kitschy new wave silliness, reminding record buyers that music can be fun. I guess I'm okay with the sleeve picture being the same as the albums, with a red background instead of yellow. Whatever. I have a couple of 45s here from the Fun Boy 3. This was the band that split off from the Specials back in the early 80s. This was unintentional, but what you're seeing here are bookends. The Lunatics Are Taking Over the Asylum was their first single in 1981. Farmyard Connection was their last single, only released in Germany in 1983. The evolution of the offshoot of a ska revival band in 2 quick songs. Next I have the Beat, or better known in the States here as the English Beat. I Confess by the Beat, or the English Beat, depending on which side of the pond you prefer, was the first single off Special Beat Service, an album that would be the only one to chart in the US. And not only is the single sleeve a sturdy gatefold, but there's also a second record featuring a pair of live tracks. A lovely treat indeed. I do like the cover comic there that tells the story. This is a fun one. This is the 1980 Stiff Records edition of We Got the Beat by the Go-Go's. Not only is the original release of We Got the Beat a bit edgier than the one you heard off of Beauty and the Beat, but it also features the original bassist, Margot Oliveira. She would eventually be fired from the band and replaced with Kathy Valentine. So here was the surprise hit of 1990, Enigma, Sadness Part 1. 1990 was a weird year, when you could combine Gregorian chant, Latin lyrics, and allusions to Marquis de Sade to create a #1 dance hit. Allegedly, it also inspired Sega's Streets of Rage soundtrack. Maybe. Seriously, I only bought this record cheap because it came with 13 jukebox strips for some reason, all of which say Sadness Part 1. I could put 13 copies of this in my jukebox if I ever have one, and just drive people crazy. You could have any song you want as long as it's Sadness Part 1. Here we have the original release of Julie Brown's Homecoming Queen's Got a Gun and I Like 'Em Big and Stupid. Julie Brown was a fixture on MTV through the late 80s, but before that she was a fresh female voice in the seemingly male-dominated genre of novelty tunes. Her self-released 1983 Bullets record release of I Like 'Em Big and Stupid put Homecoming Queen as the B-side. The song itself is a take on tragedy songs of the 50s and 60s, although real-life headlines over the last 20 years has made this song less amusing. Believe it or not, I have some Joey Scarberry with the theme from the Smash ABC television series, The Greatest American Hero. Trying to get this out of the plastic, it's kind of tough. There was a time in the 70s and 80s when a TV song could be good enough to warrant a single release that would actually chart. And indeed, believe it or not, hit #2 on the Hot 100. Mike Post co-wrote the song, already well established in the industry for his compositions on the Rockford Files and Hill Street Blues. He would go on to make themes for LA Law, The A-Team, NYPD Blue, and the sound effect from Law & Order. But I can no longer hear the song without thinking of this.
Believe it or not, George isn't at home. Please leave a message at the beep.
Here we have a repressing of Thomas Dolby's She Blinded Me with Science. Thomas Dolby has an extensive resume as a musician, composer, teacher, innovator, even serving as musical director for the TED Conference from 2001 to 2012. But there's still this one hit by which many people remember him. Thankfully, this pressing on the Good Heavens Miss Sakamoto It's Beautiful splatter vinyl is the regular song and not the whiplash-inducing extended edit you often get. Next up we have Duran Duran, Save a Prayer. For me, there's no better Duran Duran album than 1982's Rio, and Save a Prayer may just be the strongest track on the album. It was released as their third single off Rio in the UK in 1982, but not in the US. It finally got a stateside release in 1985 thanks to the video's constant MTV presence, back when that was a thing. And as a nice consolation for America's tardiness, they slapped a live version on the B-side. And of course, I always love custom labels. Next up we have Donna Summer, This Time I Know It's For Real from 1989. Donna Summer was the queen of disco, but she also had some solid hits in the 80s. In 1989, she had a new album ready, Another Place and Time, when Geffen Records dropped her from the label. With no such distribution problem internationally, the album was released in Europe to great critical and commercial success. Atlantic Records scrambled in to get a proper US release of the album out. This Time I Know It's For Real would eventually hit number 7 on the Hot 100 and number 3 on the UK singles charts. Next up we have I Like by Men Without Hats. Canadian synth-pop group Men Without Hats were off to an inauspicious start with the release of their first single, I Like, from their first full-length album, Rhythm of Youth. It barely cracked the US Top 100 and didn't even chart in their homeland of Canada. Luckily, I heard they did slightly better with their second single. Nonetheless, I think the song is so much more enjoyable, probably since it's not crammed down your ear throat every time someone mentions the 80s. Next up is Wham! Wake Me Up Before You Go Go. Pretty much the quintessential 80s song, also perfect for gasoline fights, and it owes its existence to a cheeky miswording on Andrew Ridgeley's wake-up call letter to his parents. And while you marvel over the sleeve for the single, just know that this is the US version. The UK got a much better looking sleeve. Nonetheless, the catchy tune hit number 1 on both sides of the Atlantic. A Flock of Seagulls, Space Age Love Song. Space Age Love Song was the fourth and final single off of A Flock of Seagulls' debut album. And while not performing as strongly on the charts as their previous single, I Ran, it still enjoyed significant popularity. And as part of the second British invasion that dominated the early years of MTV, A Flock of Seagulls' debut actually hit number 10 and number 5 in the US and Canada respectively, while peaking at number 32 at home. And what thanks do we get? Again, a crappy sleeve when compared to the UK version. Next up we have The Normal with Warm Leatherette. The Normal was a short-lived music product by music producer Daniel Miller. Warm Leatherette is basically the plot of J.G. Ballard's controversial novel Crash, rewritten as a short electronic industrial pop song. But like the Mute Records original, Warm Leatherette is technically the B-side here. TVOD, a song about TV addiction, is the main attraction on the coveted A-side slot. Subsequent pressings altered the order of the songs on the sleeve when Leatherette gained more popularity. I'm not going to do it. Next up we have ex-Buzzcock Howard Devoto's Magazine with About the Weather. About the Weather is the only single from Magazine's fourth and final album, Magic, Murder, and the Weather, at least until their 2009 reunion. The album was considered a disappointment compared to their previous 3. And indeed, Howard already left Magazine by the time of this album's release, effectively ending the band. All the same, About the Weather is still a great song. And custom label art. Aces. And now we have XTC, 10 Feet Tall, from their 1979 Drums and Wires album. In 1979, XTC released their third album, Drums and Wires. The album showed a sudden maturity to the songwriting of both Andy Partridge and Colin Molden. And it was singles like Making Plans for Nigel that earned them sold-out venues and a couple of appearances on Top of the Pops. America, however, hadn't quite warmed up to the Swindon-based band, which is why we received a US-only single release of 10 Feet Tall, completely re-recorded for American sensibilities, whatever that may be. And while the back of the sleeve lists a pair of B-side tracks, this is actually a promo copy. Both sides of the same song, except in stereo and mono. Just in case you were wondering, yes, I did count the number of rulers here, and there are 10-foot-long rulers. Next on deck, we have Wear Your Love Like Heaven by Donovan, released in 1967. First of all, I'm beginning to realize that I have a lot of records by British acts. But anyway, Wear Your Love Like Heaven was the opening track of psychedelic folk rock act Donovan's fifth album, A Gift from a Flower to a Garden. That 1967 release was not only Donovan's first double album, but was also one of the first instances of a box set in rock music. If you're a Simpsons fan, you might recognize this song from Season 13's Weekend at Burnsies, aka the episode where Homer does medical marijuana. If you're a fan of dad jokes and Battle of the Network starred athletes, you'll enjoy Gabriel Kaplan with Up Your Nose. Gabe Kaplan was a fairly successful stand-up comedian in the early 70s. In 1975, he was cast as the titular character on the ABC sitcom Welcome Back, Kotter. Kaplan seemed to mine a lot of comedy out of the baffling catchphrase, "Up your nose with a rubber hose." The 1976 single spent 3 weeks on the top 100, peaking at 91. Also, the B-side, Bicentennial Minutes, was a play on the Bicentennial Minute shorts that aired on CBS from 1974 to 1976. This pun aged perfectly. Next up, Deck of Cards, a spoken word piece by everyone's favorite host of Tic-Tac-Toe, Wink Martindale. Deck of Cards is a story about a soldier who was arrested for playing with his cards during church services. During the trial, he explains in great detail how it serves as his prayer book. The piece was originally performed by T. Texas Tyler in 1948. Wink Martindale, then a DJ, recorded the song in 1959 where it made it to number 17 on the Billboard Hot 100, spending 17 weeks on the chart and selling over 1 million copies. Not something I normally listen to, but I do enjoy game shows, so I bought it as just kind of a memorabilia piece. Next up, we have New York natives Our Daughter's Wedding with Lawn Chairs. They're everywhere. Our Daughter's Wedding was yet another synth-pop group from the late 70s, early 80s. But what sets them apart from their contemporaries was the ability to name their band after something they saw written on a greeting card display divider. Lawn Chairs was their second single. Released in 1980, it found immediate success on college radio and in dance clubs. However, the success was short-lived. They only released an EP and an album before calling it quits. Next from the quarter bin, we have Robin Scott's M and Moonlight and Muzak. Robin Scott, through his music project entitled simply M, achieved international success in 1979 with the release of Pop Music. His second single off the album New York, London, Paris, Munich was Moonlight and Muzak. While not as big as his first single, it still did well on the UK charts, peaking at number 33. It's a great song with an elaborate, story-driven promo video that was quite innovative for 1979. Coming straight from the quarter bin at my local record store, we have Shalimar with Dancing in the Sheets from the Footloose soundtrack, 1984. The movie Footloose may have had critics unimpressed, but the 1984 movie found enough of an audience to become one of the decade's most iconic films. And the companion soundtrack album had a little something for all tastes. Kenny Loggins, Bonnie Tyler, Sammy Hagar, and even the R&B outfit Shalimar, post Jody Watley. Disagree if you'd like, but I think Dancing in the Sheets is the best song on the Footloose soundtrack, besides perhaps Denise Williams' Let's Hear It for the Boy. And while Loggins is firing on all cylinders here, I bet he never rode dolphins on any of his album covers. And since this is a children's record case, it would be incomplete without an actual children's record. In this case, Susan and Bob sing one of these things. And what are kids called? They're called kids. I won't bore you with everything you probably already know about Sesame Street, but this record came out in 1970, indicating that this was from the very early years of the venerable children's show. Bob is played by Bob McGrath, easy to remember, while Susan is played by Loretta Long. Although their roles have greatly diminished, both are still involved with Sesame Street in some capacity today. Alright, I'm off to go alphabetize these into my collection, so in the meantime, stay healthy, stay safe, and I will see you next time.
Up your nose!
Up your nose!
With a rubber hose!
With a rubber hose!
Twice as far!
Twice as far!
With chalk.
The special edition of this repressing, which will not come out of the sleeve, maybe...